Let's say you've been walking through the woods in your favorite national park. It's a beautiful day, the sun is out, the birds are singing, and there on the trail in front of you, you see one of these. A projectile point. Not even finished. In fact, it's broken. Amazing. It's as if nature has given you a gift of history to enjoy. And it's easy to think. I mean, no one else saw it out here after all these years, and it's broken anyway. No reason you can't just pick it up and put it in your pocket to show your friends, right? Well, wrong. If you're hiking in the United States, then you would be in violation of any of 6 laws dating back to 1906. This is not to mention how the local indigenous population would feel about you walking off with a piece of their cultural heritage. But why do we have these laws to begin with? Isn't finders keepers a thing? Well, not really. You see, at the turn of the last century, we had a problem on public lands. A looting problem. People coming into ruins of past indigenous cultures and trucking them off to museums and collections around the world without any form of regulation. So, in 1906, the U.S. Congress passed the Antiquities Act, which was signed into law by then-President Theodore Roosevelt. This law gave the president power to establish national monuments on federally owned property and protected the antiquities within public lands, antiquities being the ruins and remains of Native American cultures. This law, however, failed to prevent looting. It had some rather ambiguous wording leading to the passing of 2 new laws in the 1970s, the Archaeological and Historic Preservation Act in 1974 and the Archaeological Resources Protection Act in 1979, both of which clarified and reinforced the federal government's commitment to preserving cultural resources. First, the Archaeological and Historic Preservation Act, or AHPA, provides for the preservation of significant scientific, historic, and archaeological materials and data that might be lost or destroyed by federally sponsored projects. And second, the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, or ARPA, created rules for the possession, custody, excavation, record-keeping, and disposition of data of archaeological materials. This 1979 law is the one relevant to you and your pocket. You see, ARPA essentially says that removing the projectile point is an excavation, which is illegal on public lands like national parks without a permit and can land you in prison for between 2 and 10 years. No fun, and certainly not worth the risk just to show off to family and friends back home. So go ahead, take a look, admire the piece of history that has revealed itself to you in its path through time. Take some pics even. If it's not buried, pick it up and feel it, but always put it back. Even better, take a hole in the dirt nearby with the heel of your comfy hiking boot and bury it in there so someone else, one day, has a chance to enjoy it. Leave the excavation and projectile point possession to permitted professional preservationists, or archaeologists for short. But what about the indigenous individual perspective? What does one indigenous person think of cultural resource management? Well, I talked with my friend Augustine Quintana II, or Auggie, from Santo Domingo, Pueblo, also known as Cabo Pueblo, to learn his opinion about cultural resource management by asking him some questions about how he, as an active citizen of the Pueblo Nation, feels about archaeologists digging into his past.
Hello there, everybody, and hello, Ian. My English name is Augustine Quintana, and what you just heard there is my native language, which is Keres. Just stating my name, who my parents are, and their clans. I am of the Oak clan, my mother as well, Oak clan, my father, Great Fox clan.
If it's okay with you, I wanted to ask you just a few questions about cultural resources. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, because usually when we learn about like Native peoples being affected by archaeological digs and recovery of human remains in some cases, it's usually from the perspective of the nation or leadership within the nation. And we don't really seem to get as much information from individuals as part of the nation. And as far as your opinion, how do you feel about archaeologists in a lot of cases, people of European descent coming into lands that are historically a part of, possibly in some cases, a sovereign nation that was here before Europeans. How do you feel about them coming in and digging things up and removing them and possibly putting them in museums or putting them in collections, even putting them on display?
That's a good question. Well, one incident that we had here on the Pillow was when they were constructing the new housing projects out for, I would say, roughly to the north of the Pueblo. It was at the time I was like probably around 7 years old. My dad was a framer, and just the stories that he told me, as well as my grandfather, that area where they constructed the houses, was once like the battle. Like that's where we fought all our battles with our enemies. So they're kind of skeptical, and they did find like remains, arrowheads, weapons, pottery shards.
Yeah.
So they did have archaeologists come in, take a look, but we already knew like who or what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But with the approval of the Pueblo Council, see, they said to go ahead with the projects, but not to take the bones out or any remains, just to put them back in the ground, leave them as they were. But nowadays, even because my dad lives in that area as well,
mm-hmm.
He says once in a while he'll hear just like the sounds of like war cries or horses running, gunshots.
Yeah.
Just at the time, depending on who you are, just offer a prayer, tell them you're not there for bad intentions. But as far as like removing, put in the museum, I would just tell the archaeologists or people like, go ahead, if you want to do that, go ahead. But this is what I would tell people, like, how would you feel if I, myself, or someone else dug up your grandparents' remains and put it in our museum, just saying this is what Europeans wore? Because I know you bury people with, like, their precious belongings, right?
Yeah.
And it states, yes. How would you feel if I came onto your land, dug up that grave, I took any treasures for myself, and I put on some of that treasure on for display, saying this person, this family has this treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Like say, if you're very spiritual or religious, if you mess with stuff like that, like just in general bones of the deceased, or who knows, objects that could have been bewitched of who knows what.
Yeah.
If you mess with those, then you could go home with something attached to you that can cause mental stress or just wreak havoc on your relationship, your marriage, your job, just because that individual wanted to be curious and say, oh, I'm gonna put this in the museum and get $100,000 for it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think no amount of money could be worth having to have some spirit get attached to you and wreak havoc on your life every day.
So basically, like, you're kind of saying things, you're more okay with things like arrowheads, potsherds, that kind of thing being put in a museum, but if it came to, like, somebody found a grave of one of your ancestors, you would want them to just leave it alone because that's theirs. Even though they're passed away, that is their property that they were buried with.
Yeah, like I said, I can't force someone to, like, not take it, but
yeah,
I'm just like, say, giving them a warning of, like, experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you take it, and right away you're gonna have something attached to you. So I can't say I told you so. And like I said, like, and then when I asked them, like, how would you feel if it was me putting up your family's bones or stuff out for display?
Yeah, or even just digging them up at all.
That's what people nowadays they don't think. There's someone bound to do the same thing to them, because of course Europeans to us are exotic. You guys we don't have facial hair or do this or do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's like when I go to like certain museums, I do before I go in, I do like a cleanse or a prayer.
Yeah.
And if it's up for display to where like a visitor could touch it, then I'm not touching it, man.
No, I understand that.
I won't touch it.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that, like, nowadays the mentality has changed quite a bit towards, like, these cultural resources and graves especially, of doing our best to not disturb the dead. But I do personally feel like that more could be done to respect the remains of Native Americans, because just from my personal understanding of things, like the people with European descent, they're very respectful of their cemeteries, like very. But when it comes to doing archaeology and then they find like a Native American sort of cemetery, it's a totally different story. They're going to start. They are required by law to respect them, but I feel like people are they really want to dig it up and see what's in there. Not necessarily, I think, as like treasure hunters. I genuinely think a lot of these people do want to do that to learn.
I mean, I would say, a person's gonna do their job. So what I would suggest, in my opinion, like, you can dig it up, but just don't take it. Leave it. Just put it back where you found it. As you found it, you can observe it, take pictures of it, or take a notice about it.
Yeah.
And when you're done, just put it back, cover it back up, and like I say, depending if you're religious or not, just offer some sort of a prayer, or just leave it good intentions,
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that too, because there are a lot of, people in CRM, this is the work that they have to do. Like you said, they're going to do their job, and part of it is to determine whether something is even, like, if they're just finding little pieces of flint or obsidian kicking around, like, is there really that much value to preserving that? Probably not. But if they run into like a grave or a bunch of graves, then it's a different story. Like, preservation becomes key. So yeah, long past are the days where people actually like dug up graves, thankfully. But I do feel like there's still a ways to go as far as, like, in some cases, even repatriating remains. There's a lot of work to that. In fact, right now I saw that the Smithsonian's hiring somebody to do the repatriation of remains that are being still held in the archives at the Smithsonian, because they just have so many, and they want to get them. The federal government wants to get them back to their people. It's good to see that changing.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you say, you never know just who they might have. They could be a dead witch, or who knows what. You never know.
You don't know. And it's probably for the best that they go back home. What's sad, though, is sometimes home doesn't exist anymore. And that's another issue for another conversation, honestly. I want to thank my friend Auggie for his words and say how much I appreciate his continued support experiencing his culture. So when we find things while recreating in a pine forest in California as a member of the public, or an archaeologist working in a trench in the high desert heat of New Mexico, it's good not just to remember the laws that protect cultural resources, but to consider the cultures from which they originated and how they may be affected by these actions we perform.